Okay, so yeah, we're just going to talk a little bit, very briefly, about the history, and then we're going to talk about how we got them manufactured. Then we're going to talk about some of our software that we're working on, and I don't know, and then at the end, I don't know how many people are actually interested in buying one, but we have 3 of them here available today. Wow. If more than 3 people raise their hand and say they want one, then we have written a small little program that will let the commander decide which one of you gets to buy them.
And they're not free, they actually are for sale, so don't put your name in unless you want to buy one. If not, we have them sold already, so it's not a problem if you're not interested.
So I'm going to let Kevin start with just talking a little bit about the history here.
Okay. Well, I'll just stand over here. So yeah, we've been through, what, 4.5 years now of the Commander project, if you guys have been working on it or watching it that long. And we've been through a number of steps to get there. And this is really a discussion that I wanted to have in a video in the past to just kind of talk about all the work that we've really done. Because I don't think a lot of people realize how many different prototypes we've made and how many different revisions we've gone through, how many changes we've gone through, how many decisions we've changed our mind on. So that's really the main part I wanted to talk about. But this is kind of our itinerary. The only other thing on here that I think that he didn't mention was Suntronic, which we're going to show a little bit about the manufacturing on. But let me just start in here. So the original concept was really to just have something that was more or less a spiritual successor to the Commodore 64. It's not compatible with the Commodore 64. I've actually heard some people saying this weekend that you can put Commodore ROMs on it, cartridges. That is not true. It is proprietary. It's its own thing. So it was never intended to work really with other things. It will work with Commodore peripherals. You can use like a printer or a floppy drive like that. But that was just because we were using the Commodore kernel. That stuff was built in. And we just thought it'd be kind of neat to have the ability to do that. Obviously, we have an SD card too, which loads much, much more quickly. So it's really more of a curiosity. But, you know, David's original intention was to really have something also that doesn't use custom hardware like a lot of the old Commodore 64s and VIC-20s. I guess the VIC-20s got a VIC chip, but most of it is off the shelf. We were trying to build something where you could buy everything off the shelf, where you could actually go to the store, buy the parts. Hopefully, for a few years down the road, they'll still be able to be repaired when the time comes. So that was really what we tried to do. Now, we didn't exactly do that, but we got fairly close to it, I'd say. And I was just going to show, this was our first video card before, 5 years ago?
Yeah, it was called that just plugged into the Commodore for testing and whatnot.
Actually, the thing called the Gameduino, and that was an adapter that we made for the user port.
Yeah, we abandoned that pretty quickly when we realized the throughput speed was just not going to be acceptable. I mean, it worked, but it just, you know.
Yeah, this was our last iteration of it. This was a VGA card that was meant to work using the Gameduino design, but it was kind of out of support even when we started working on it. And so we just kind of shelved it at this point and started looking for other video options. I mean, we did talk about chips like the TMS 9280, I forget the number, the chip that was using the ColecoVision. That's probably about the only chip you can buy in any quantity at this point.
But honestly, I wasn't very impressed.
And it's not a great chip. Yeah. You've seen a TI-99 or a ColecoVision, you've seen that chip, and it's, you know, 1982.
Yeah, especially for text mode, it's just really not that great. So.
Yeah. So I actually have the first board we tried to build with a lot of that stuff in mind. This is one of them. It actually is missing the Vera on the bottom. I think we had about 3 or 4 of these. I never actually finished populating all of this one because these were AY3 8910 sound chips that we had originally decided to use, because when we were looking into it, we thought, hey, these are available. Well, it turns out they're less available than I thought, and they're too slow. So we actually were shooting at 4 megahertz at first, and we couldn't even get those chips to work at 4 megahertz, which I kind of knew. But we went ahead and tried it, and we moved on later to the YM2151, which I'll get to in a moment. That one also seemed to be relatively available, but it's now proven not to be as available as once we thought. So this machine originally had 128K of ROM, 2 megs of RAM, and it banked very similarly to the way the Commander banks today to access more memory, but we did wind up changing the design from this quite a bit. This one actually had a place for an LCD screen on it as well, because at first we didn't have a video card and we wanted to just have a display so we could see what was going on and write some code to just make sure things were working. and that went away as well. I just brought this one up if you guys want to look at it, just because I thought it was kind of an interesting first stab. But this was actually where we first introduced the Vera as well.
I think we could pass it around.
Yeah, if you guys want to take a look, pass it around, feel free. And as you notice, the headers for the Vera are upside down because that was one of the many mistakes I made. I got the data sent to me from not the top view, but the bottom view. And I don't know who does that, but that's how I got it the first time. So the board wound up upside down on the bottom. But so that motherboard also, I was going to say, I picked that size completely at random. I actually was trying to go originally with micro ITX or ITX, but it wouldn't fit. I couldn't get all the chips in there. So I really just arbitrarily picked that size, but after I looked at it, I'm like, wow, this is almost a micro ATX. I might as well just do that. So that one actually won't fit in the case, but here I am debugging it for the first time ever, and there it is with its LCD screen on it. And there's
and
the
I actually
first.
did show in a video the one with the LCD like 4 years ago, if anybody remembers that.
That is the first code I ever got to run on the thing right there. And for some reason it didn't like the space, but it said hello world, sort of. And then, yeah, this is actually what the Veras look like. There's like a little dongle on there, and I didn't design this board, but that was the programmer. And if you look at the bottom of that board, you can see where the other module would have mounted. The Vera later, of course, we moved to having the ports actually on it for the back. And then when I went ATX, so I wanted to make sure everything would actually fit in the rear I/O panel. But at the time, it certainly wouldn't have fit. So the ports were actually on the motherboard itself, and everything was the video and the S-video and all that stuff was on there. So. And this was what it would have looked like if I had made it green, and I decided at the last second to make it red. But after I made the red one, I decided I didn't like that either, so we wound up with blue, just because I liked blue better. So I hope you guys like blue. That's what it is. All right, so as I mentioned, the AY38910s were too slow, so we dropped those. We dropped the LCD because now we had a video solution that was working. We really didn't need it. It was just more of a, we need something to actually see what's going on. Went to the micro ATX, changed the Vera around, as I mentioned, and I also put an expansion bus on it. If you notice, that one just has pin headers, and it was meant to just be for I/O ports, like for, or not I/O ports, but for just I/O devices, like anything that would use, something like mapped I/O. But now it actually has a full connection to the CPU, so you could take over the entire system, run any type of CPU you wanted on there, and take it over completely. So that's there. We also added a real-time clock. I think I forgot to mention this earlier or later, but we dropped the DS12885 because those are like $12 each for no reason now. But we switched over to using I2C later, and got a much cheaper chip on there. And that was actually prototype 2, and it looks very similar to this one, but I've been constantly moving things around, just trying to optimize placement and trying to make it a little happier. And I think I've finally gotten it down to something pretty good now. It sounds good and clean. And there's the back panel, and you can see the SNES ports are not oriented, mirrored, and I've changed that later. I was actually having trouble finding both of them for sale. I was only finding that one. That's the same one that's on the Petsky Robots adapter, just for the record. A lot of those. Now here's the third prototype. Not a lot of changes between the second and the third one. We were actually using one of the 6522 VIAs to do the RAM and ROM banking to control those. And someone had suggested, like, why don't we just use the 0 page addresses for 0 and 1 and just make the hardware change the bank automatically. So now all you literally have to do is one instruction, and the banks change and you're off and running. So it made things a little bit faster. I think it probably dropped a few clock cycles in there.
Yeah.
So that was more of a speed thing. Vera actually added a programmable sound generation at this point as well. It wasn't there originally, but the Vera now outputs sound very much like the SID. And with that and the YM2151 and digital sound, I dare say we can make just about any sound that any machine in the 80s made if you're willing to spend the time writing the code for it. I moved to also a 60-pin connector from a 50-pin. I had originally done that on Proto 2, but that's the same pin as the Apple II, and everyone's like, hey, can I put Apple II cards in here? And no, you cannot. Nothing else. So unfortunately, when I moved to the 60-pin connector, I didn't really think about it, but it turns out that's actually the same size as the Famicom. And I didn't know that at the time, because I've never had a Famicom. I didn't really think about what it was. But as it turns out, that was fortuitous, and I'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, we moved the PS2. That was another problem. We were fighting for a very long time. We could not get it to work past 4 megahertz, bit banging it from the 6522. And we'd moved to a microcontroller to control the ATX power supply and all that other stuff. And it really wasn't doing very much, but there is a microcontroller on board now, and it is really the arbiter between PS2 and talking to the 6522 to get data back and forth. And with that, we were able to get to 8 megahertz, and that's the main reason we went there. Yeah, I fixed the SNES ports, and I actually moved to a 4-layer board at that time. I have a ground planes across the bottom and the middle of the board. He was actually getting a lot of resets randomly in his house on his system, and after I did that, I don't think you've had any subsequently, so it seems to have gotten rid of the noise. So that was kind of another, just quality of life. And again, this is Proto 3, and this is Proto 4. And you can see like the power connectors in the front, and I've actually moved it over to the side because I wasn't thinking about it getting in the way of the expansion ports. There's just so many little things I never really sat down and considered completely until I was getting to the last version. I've actually, let's see what I got here. Yeah, here's like what it looked like after I was getting it ready to be Proto 4. Most of my boards look something like that. Even this one has a bunch of stuff on it that, even though it's done, I still playing around with stuff on it. But yeah, the 4th prototype, Joe Burks, we've added his I/O stretch circuit. I had thought the YM2151 had been working all this time at 8 megahertz because it seemed like it was. And they're like, no, it's not. It's actually only getting about half the righteous into it, or maybe something like that. But, listening to music on it, it sounded okay, but trying to use the timer and other things, we started realizing pretty quickly that that wasn't going to work. So what he designed, it's something we'd actually looked at before, but his had a nice addition to where it was still outputting an 8 megahertz signal to the VIA. We were worried about slowing the clock down because the timers inside of some of the chips are dependent on the CPU, or on the process, or on the clock speed. And if we were trying to slow down the speed to access a device, then you would wind up slowing down the timer response, and now the timers are going to be off in a really unpredictable way. But his circuit actually outputs a constant 8 megahertz that goes to the VIA, so they'll stay running. And when you access something that's a slow I/O device, you'll access it at 2 megahertz instead. And on the bus, there's actually 5 separate expansion ports that you can add your own devices to. And 2 of those are 8 megahertz, and 3 of them are 2. And for example, the SID will run at 2 megahertz. And that's really what we were trying to do, is make sure we could still create a place for people to run old peripherals on here. So older things should work with it theoretically if you can get the timing right. Yeah, so the Vera and the system ROM, that is a whole other story where the Discord and team and the X16 community has really just shined in the last, 9 months or so. I mean, we were kind of dead in the water a little bit because we were having trouble getting the PS2 ports to work. And that's like all so distant of memory now, and there's been so many updates and so many additions added, and just, like you can do Control-Alt-Delete now. That works. So that's pretty cool, and these were just things that, it was taking us a long time to get added, but here we are. In just a few months, we've really gotten across the finish line in a way that I didn't think would be possible this quickly. So really thanks to these guys. Give them a hand. Thank you, Discord. Thank you all. Excellent. Thank you.
Specifically, he's talking about Joe Burks and Troy Albin over here.
Yeah.
I was going to introduce them later, but I guess now's a good time.
Well, yeah.
So Joe's been working on like some FPGA fixes. He's done some of the stuff Kevin just talked about.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
Lot of little fixes here and there. He's also worked on our Yamaha substitute chip. Troy here has done pretty much taken over the kernel work from Michael Stile, and he's also written the 3 Nintendo ports we've had: Super Mario Brothers, Marble Madness, and Montezuma's Revenge. So just tons of work from these 2 guys here. So if y'all have any questions of kernel stuff or whatever, you talk to him after.
Yeah. So yeah, there's Proto 4. It's sitting right here as well. But this is the board that we just shipped Thursday. If you guys didn't hear that, we did actually get some out the door. I just showed this. This is a cartridge, as I mentioned. I didn't mention it here. It was on this slide, but we redesigned the bus one more time between Proto 3 and Proto 4, and we actually have 512K of ROM on the motherboard. We're not even using it all. I think we're around 208K or something. However, David was like, hey, we've got this extra, space here. What would it take to add it to the expansion port? And it took a little bit of redesigning, but we were able to cram a total of 4 megs of ROM space into the system. And that'll give you a cartridge with up to 3.5 megs natively. And obviously people could build some sort of way to bank it out later and add more RAM if you wanted to, kind of like they did with the Nintendos. But I mean, 3.5 megs should be interesting. And one of the things that I thought was cool about that is, Zixit is the first game that he wrote that moved over. And since it's in ROM, it's effectively sitting in memory on the system. So it is just super snappy to load things. Even though the SD card's fast, it's just instant, which is pretty cool. So there probably will be a market for that for certain types of games or people that are just interested in cartridges, but more than likely anything that runs on a cartridge will be able to run on SD as well, unless somebody chooses not to. I mean, it's an open system, so anyone's welcome to write games, make hardware, anything they want. Just pay us $10,000 and we'll, I'm just kidding. So yeah. Also, there's one other addition. There's I did actually add an audio expansion port on here. I really, as this system's developed, I'm a very music kind of guy. I love old MIDI stuff and all the old Amiga mod trackers and all that good stuff. We will eventually have an expansion port that will have a MIDI card. I know people are working on it already. And I added an audio header on here, which would allow you to actually put your own card on and inject effects into the signal. So there's actually, the bus itself has an input for audio. The YM2151 and the Vera are all mixed together, but on that header you can isolate them independently, and you could put reverb effects or whatever the heck you wanted on there and just add a card for it. I haven't actually designed anything for it yet, but it's there, went down the road, but I just had room for it, so I thought it'd be a nice little addition. So yeah, you could theoretically make a pretty cool 80s chiptune machine out of this eventually, and I think that card would help add a lot of extra stuff that no one's really done. And this right here is what the production board more or less is going to look like. And if you guys have seen any of David's videos, he's shown a case that's a small plastic one. It's over at his booth if you haven't seen it. But in the future, we're actually going to build a cartridge slot into the side of the system. So this last connector is going to be right angled to allow that to come in. Unfortunately, I had to notch out some of the board, and it took me quite a bit of reworking to do this, but because the cartridge itself is going to hit the PCB. So I had to get it out of the way. So it looks a little weird. You can just mount that particular connector vertically still if you want and just use it like in a traditional case. But if you mount it with the right angle, then it's going to work with the case. And then you can stick a cartridge in the side rather than have it stick it out the top of the case, and you can still put stuff on top of it. So that was kind of the idea there. Okay, I think I'm about done with the history now. That's more or less it. I just kind of blew through it. There's so many more things that I built and devices that we tested, and they just wound up not working out, but I just wanted to blow through the kind of quick pieces of it.
So, keyboards. We're talking about keyboards. All right, so do we have pictures here? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've had the WASD keyboard available for quite a while, and we don't actually make that. You can just order that from WASD, and they have like a pre-thing set up for us. It's like a $200 keyboard, which is really nice. It's like,
Cherry keys
and stuff like that. What we've been using for our prototypes is we've been buying Perix keyboards from Amazon and putting these stickers on, which work pretty well. But we had also been working for like the last couple of years with Perix to get actual keyboards made. And I don't know that's actually one with the stickers there. And then, and then this is the actual one. I have the actual one here over at my booth, or actually one right here, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So these are the actual final keyboards. I had to order 1,000 of these. That was the minimum quantity.
Yeah.
And
it's real cheap too.
They charge us like $8,000 just for a one-time engineering fee, and then we had to pay $18 a piece for these. So anyway, long story short, it was like somewhere around $28,000 just to get keyboards made, but we finally got that. Finally got that done.
Oh yeah, this is just talk about FM sound and programmable sound chips. I don't know if you guys are too familiar with the way 80 sound work, but there's really two different types of sound. FM Genesis or generation, which was what Yamaha did. Roland did something called LA synthesis, which was pretty similar. But programmable sound generation is like it's like a synthesizer. It creates sine waves, square waves, fundamental sounds, and then you can add mix things to it, like filters and so forth. That's pretty much how the SID worked, and the SID had some unique abilities that made it sound a little different than other programmable sound chips, but we're actually able to do a pretty fair amount of that, and it doesn't sound exact, but it gets pretty close. And I really wanted to talk about the YM2151 as well, because that chip, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, has become scarce. And I actually, years ago, picked this chip, and when I first selected it, I was able to buy them all day, every day for about $1.50, no problem. Even so much so that I built this card, and I don't know if you guys know that I run a site called Tech Select, but we sell a lot of ISA cards. And I decided to build this to really be the sound system for the X16, so I could get some testing and run through some chips, really, just to see how they behaved. And they've been working great. I've sold a couple hundred of these things now. And they still sell from time to time as long as I can still get chips. But we did that really just to be as a proof of concept. And then right as we got the funding and we started to move forward, every chip I bought for like the next month was fake. All of these are fake. I have piles of them. I bought 300 and every one of them was garbage. And I don't know what happened, but in 2 months it went from no problem to no availability. so
fake as in not work at all?
As in the machine won't even come on. It just locks its hardware up. Yeah.
Actually, somebody put one in one of those chip testers, and it determined it was like a 4164 RAM
it's
chip.
a 2 or 4K RAM chip, yeah.
That had been resurfaced as a Yamaha.
They look
chip.
similar because Hitachi has that same notch in there that are in these chips. And I think Hitachi made Yamaha's chips, and that's why they look similar. But anyway, as it turns out, we do have more chips now. We've been able to buy some here and there, and that's what I've been spending a lot of time, and he's been spending a lot of time doing. And I think we have several hundred now, and I don't know if it's going to be enough forever, but we're past the hump a little bit.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're also working on other ways to create like a chip that would emulate the YM2151. And I was going to show this here to there's two chips involved, if you guys are aware. There's the actual YM2151, and then there's this other chip, the YM3012. I can still buy those all day. The 3012 is actually the DAC. The YM2151 is actually a purely digital chip. The data going into it is digital, and the data coming out from it is digital into the DAC. And so we don't feel like emulating it's going to be too far off because it's just a digital part. And we're still planning to use the YM3012 as long as I can get those. And it's a 10-bit DAC, not a modern 16-bit DAC, so it kind of has some grit to it just naturally. And so I think if we leave that in there, it still gives it the characteristic of the right chip. So I don't think we're going to have a problem moving down the road because the YM2151 is not, even if we can't get it, we can still get the DACs. And the DACs were used on several different chips, so it wasn't just for the YM2151. So there's just a lot more of those out there. So anyway, it's kind of our plan for the move. So don't worry about the YM2151. We're going to have it one way or another. We've already got quite a few hundred of them now, so I think we're going to be okay. So yeah, this is the self-building. So as you guys, if you watch the videos, you know that we bought some equipment. We bought a solder dip station and went through a lot of trial and error. And after about 2 months, we kind of decided probably not going to work for a board this large. And the real problem is when you drop something cold into a big molten pot of metal, it warps really quickly. And no matter what temperature I preheated the board to, the million of iterations, oh my God, that I went through trying to get it to look good. And I finally talked to people and they're like, you're just running too big of a board in there. It's going to warp. You get thermal expansion. It's just going to happen. They're like, you really can't dip boards that size. You need to wave solder them. And so that's kind of where we went later. But I was going to show this little video here if you guys didn't see it. This is the first time I tried to dip a board ever. And just watch the board. You'll see here in a second. It's getting the slag away, and then it drops it. And then watch the taco. And I got it much better than that over time. It certainly...
It did?
But, then we went into a situation where, see all the staining on the bottom of the board? As I would heat the board more, now the flux becomes one with the board. And that board's uncleanable. I mean, you literally can't get that stuff off. We tried forever. And I got it better, but it was always going to either leave spots on the board or warp them like a taco to make them. And that was kind of what I was left with. I don't like it doing that. That was a scary thing to see. So we decided to talk to some other people and move forward with another solution. And that's where Suntronic comes in. And I'll let David talk about this part because he's been talking with them a bit more.
Okay. Don't you have some slides there?
Yeah. I'll start showing.
Yeah, so this place, actually, believe it or not, is just right down the road here in Richardson.
Yeah, like 2 miles away.
Yeah, just a few miles away, and they do electronics assembly, and we went ahead and Kevin and I went up there one day and we talked to them and showed them the board, and they got back to us a week or so later with some prices. So yeah, Kevin drove all the parts up there, and why is it going on its own?
I'm just hitting space.
Oh,
I'm just showing pictures.
sorry.
We don't know what we're doing up here,
yeah.
in case you guys haven't noticed.
I thought it was just cycling in its own.
No, go ahead. You'll let you do it.
So anyway, yeah. So
Jeez.
you're gonna all see this in a video here soon, but I just took some still shots to show up here. But yeah, this is just the factory, and they do make you wear like this special anti-static shoes and smocks and stuff like that. And so here's a line of the X16 boards, and it's a big long line, and it goes all the way around in a circle actually, kind of. And they have like an employee that goes around and just populates all the parts one at a time. And they say for this number of machines, it's just, I guess, easier to have manually have someone do it. And then they have a wave solder machine, which is kind of similar to our dip station, but it doesn't like cook the whole board at once. It's like a line of solder, and as it, it's like rolling in almost like a fondue machine or something like that, and it rolls over it, so it's only heating a little bit of the board at a time. And I have some video of that I'll show in the next video. But anyway, yeah, and there I am holding the board after pulling it out of the clean. It goes through a big washing machine after that.
Big dishwasher. Yeah.
And then they send it over to QC, and they like cut any like leads off the bottom that are too long, and they remove any masks and stuff like that. And then, here they are. They're actually fixing a solder bridge that they found in QC. So there's a little bit of a manual labor there. But anyway, so yeah, we were going to talk a little bit about some misconceptions. But first we're going to talk about the pricing schedule.
It's very simple. I went out and I researched business plans, and I found one that I think was really going to meet what we wanted. Step one. Tell everyone that it's $500, $50, but really charge $500, and that was absolutely nuts. Step two, I don't know, and step three, profit. I guess you guys don't watch a lot of South Park.
Okay, so this is just a joke. Actually, let's actually. I wanted to address this issue because I see it around social media a lot, and the narrative is, and I think it's spread by a few specific people. I'm not even going to give them the benefit of naming them, but the narrative is that David promised this would be $50, and now he's selling it for 10 times as much, $500. So can you pull up that next slide?
Yeah.
So first of all, this is from my original video in 2019, 4 years ago. This is actually a screenshot from the video, and I actually said first generation we were targeting $200 to $300. And then we would move down, hopefully get to the $50 product. This is what I've always said from the very beginning. And our official price for the Commander is $350. That's been the price for quite some time. There's a little confusion because I had said in that last video that we were selling our first dev boards for $500, but we said in that same video like 5 minutes later that the price was thereafter was going to be $350.
And they include more than the actual retail boards.
Right. So, and part of the reason that we were charging more for the dev boards is because we ran like 100 of them, but we gave like 30 of them away to various developers. So we have this huge cost that we've got to recoup. So unfortunately for those buying the first 80-ish boards that we're selling, you're not only paying for your board, but you're paying a little bit for the ones that we gave to our developers.
Well, and not only that, I mean, the quantity volume discount that we get for running 100 boards versus running 250, 500, or 1,000 is actually quite a bit higher. I mean, so it actually did cost legitimately more to make these, and it's going to cost for us to make the next ones because of volume.
So we're planning to run potentially 1,000 or more for the next run, and obviously we're going to get parts discounts for the volume and even manufacturing discounts. So yeah, there should be absolutely no problem selling these at $350, which has always been, well, I say always been the plan. We're actually $50 off from the original target, and that target was before the pandemic, before the inflation, before the part shortages and all that kind of stuff. So it's nothing actually short of a minor miracle that we're not more than $50 off from the original
it's no joke
target.
that like the chip that the Vera is double what it was 5 years ago, and that's not an uncommon story on many of the components, and it just has happened. So, nope.
So anyway, I hope that clears up any question over the whole pricing situation, because I know that there's a lot of people out there trying to push this narrative that we're trying to rip people off and lying to people and stuff like that. So just in case there was any question on that.
Yeah. So I think we are ready for the demo. Oh,
Yeah.
next. Oh, wait, one more slide. Future generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this board we released and called it the Developer Edition, and originally, or the Developer Board, I guess I just called it. It was really meant for early adopters. It was meant for people that wanted to write their own software, design their own hardware, or just couldn't wait. That was also an option. But it really isn't going to go away. In fact, this is going to become basically the power user version of the board, I think, because down the road we're going to do things like maybe only have 512K of base RAM instead of 2 megs. And the reason for that is as the system's evolved, we've kind of realized that you can load things from the SD card very quickly. And as a result of that, you don't really need 2 megs of RAM because you can get things in and out really quickly. And as a result of that, it's just the programmers themselves having to pay a little bit of a tax to handle the code. But with the power user version, you could do things like have a development environment running in that top 1.5 megs of RAM. Or if you're using it like a music system, you could have samples stored or other data that you might need for that. So there might be specific cases where you need more RAM. But what we're trying to give the message to any developers, target your system to use 512. Because then when we go to the game console version, the second generation of the system, it'll be cheaper, but it's going to get cheaper by removing some features. But we don't want to remove any features that'll make it incompatible with this board. So, if you need more RAM, it's this system. But if you just want to have the full functionality in most of the games, minus a few little things, then that's really the game console.
And just to be a little bit clear on how we're going to make it cheaper, it's not just removing stuff. That does seem to be like a popular narrative as well. But we're obviously going to right now we have a daughter board, so it's 2 different boards that we have to manufacture. And the next board is going to be all in one, a single board, and it's all the parts will be surface mount, or at least as many of them as can be. And so you're getting rid of a second board. That right there gets rid of a lot of manufacturing cost, and then just going to the higher quantities, the smaller parts, smaller footprint. I mean, it's going to reduce the cost quite a bit just in that. And obviously, we want to eventually move to a 3rd gen, which would be either an FPGA or a custom ASIC.
The Raspberry Pi version.
Basically,
I guess,
we call it the X16 Pi or something like that. I don't know, but but yeah, I mean, we're a few years away from that. So we're not trying to be Osborne here and say wait for our next. If you just wait 3 months, it's going to be cheaper and better. Yeah. That's not the case. This is going to be the only thing available for probably the next year at least.
Yeah.
But,
and and we're trying to make it to where there's a reason for all of them to exist. I'm not, I don't think that this one's ever going to be obsolete because of the next one. And the same with the third one. They're just going to have different purposes and different use cases. So I think that's...
Yeah, I stress that to a lot of people that I've heard some people really lose it over when I tell them, like, oh, we're only going to have one expansion slot and we're only going to have 512K and all that. And they're like, well, I could never use that. And I'm like, it's okay. You can still buy this one. It's not going away.
That's right.
We're still going to have both available. Nobody's going to make you buy
this is the one I'm using, just for the record. That's another story. All right,
so are we ready to plug in the Commander?
I think we are. We've got some demos.
All right, so this is going to be a little challenging because we're going to actually plug the Commander into the HDMI, and I'm not going to be able to easily see what I'm doing because maybe if I turn around this way, maybe I don't know.
Well, let's see if it actually works. That'll be a bonus. Oh, I left it. It worked. Oh, this is your card. It shouldn't be. All right.
Oh, by the way, so we are hooked to HDMI, but we are just using one of those little $12 VGA to HDMI adapters that you get from Amazon. So a lot of people have asked about, can I run it on HDMI? Yes, you can. However, we do, in fact, that's a project Joe is working on, is making us a second Vera board that has HDMI right on it. So in the future, you might be able to, like when you go to buy your Commander, it will actually give you the choice, like, do you want the VGA or the HDMI version? So just FYI. Anyway, I was just going to show a few neat things. Obviously, one of my big things with this is I want people to be able to sit down at the machine and write their own code in various different languages, and BASIC is one of the languages we were pushing for beginners. And it already runs 8 times faster than a Commodore 64 just from sheer clock speed, but I wanted to show you guys something this is actually, we just got this working the other day, and I'm not the one writing the code for this, but Is that my card in there?
Yeah.
All right. Alrighty. This is a little bit challenging. In fact, I'm going to go to
Do you want to like?
a little bigger there. All right. Okay, so you might have seen this little program before. I wrote it, and I've shown it a few times as a method to just demonstrate performance differences between the Commander and the X16 running BASIC. So this program here pretty much crawls on a Commodore 64 because it's running 8 times slower, and it's like you can literally see the balls going clink, 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 clink. I wish I had one here to show you. So it's already running like way faster. But now I want to show you something else. Okay. So this is the same program, compiled with Blitz. And as you can see it, I mean, gosh, if you had the Commodore 64 version, I mean, it's like night and day different next to it. So yeah, one of our guys, and unfortunately he's not here, but he's been working on a Blitz compiler for the X16, and we're hoping to eventually put it in ROM. So that, and I don't know if we can really use the word Blitz or not. I mean, I think that company's been out of business for a long time.
Blitzkrieg. There.
But it's just the German word for lightning, so I don't know if you can really copyright that. But anyway, yeah, we're hoping to eventually have that in ROM, so you could literally just type, like, instead of run, you could just type Blitz and just have it immediately blitzed and does. The neat thing about it is, this is running somewhere around 56 times faster than what this would run on a C64 in BASIC, which puts it not quite, but almost as fast as assembly language on the C64. Which is cool because that means you'll actually be able to write programs in BASIC on the X16 that are fast enough to use and do stuff on and actually be fun. So anyway, that was just one neat thing I wanted to show you. Obviously, this is the very beginning of this, but I hope over the next year or so that we're going to have a really nice development environment and everything on the actual machine, including a nice text editor for writing your, instead of having to do line numbers and stuff, to be able to like write it in an editor and have labels and stuff and then blitz it. And I think it'll be pretty cool. So that was one thing I was going to show you.
And I mean, externally too, it's fair to mention that there are at least, I don't know, 7, 8 languages, C, Prog 8, Rust, BASIC, of course, assembly. There's several out there that are already being used to write a lot of these programs. CC65 natively supports the Commander X16, so you can compile and target Commander X16 right there in your codes.
All right. How big? I was going to show Planet X16, which is going to be really difficult to show. Maybe if I turn around this way, and then I'll be talking to the wall here, so hopefully. I really do type faster than this normally, you guys.
Pressure.
Okay. So this is what I've been working on for a while. So I have the music disabled right now, but so this is an upgrade to Planet X3, but I've rewritten it completely from scratch, and it is completely mouse controlled, so you can just go to like the edge of the screen or whatever to move. There is animations. You can see like the little smoke coming out of there. The water animates. Planet X3 never had any tile animations, so I wanted to add that. So you can click your little guy, which is actually kind of hard to do from this angle. You can see all the little different options of things that he can either build or do or whatever. You can right click to tell him to go somewhere. It is smooth movement, pixel by pixel, although it does kind of follow a tile-ish pattern. I'm going to go ahead and load in an existing game. And that's, by the way, that's how fast it loads from the SD card. I mean, it is just so fast. So yeah, I can click one of these guys. I can tell him to attack something, like my little builder over here, for example. You can use the keyboard as well for faster. You can hold the shift key down and select multiple units. I'll just pick like these. And then you could say, tell them all to go over here. Some units move at different speeds, of course. That was something I could not do in Planet X3 because it was keyboard controlled and one click meant one move. So it was really hard to make one unit move faster than another. You can also double click a unit and you'll get all the same type of unit on the screen at once. So I click and I'll get all the soldiers. So I can tell them like to attack something. And then we can click on the headquarters. You can see the going down. So yes, I'll talk a little bit about the pathfinding. I'm going to use the really fast guy here because that will save some time. So pathfinding was extremely difficult to do here. Everybody's always telling me, David, use A star, and people don't understand how resource intensive A star is, especially when you have to multiply it by 256 units on the same machine. So I'm using my own custom pathfinding routine. It does pretty well. Like I'll just kind of demonstrate over here. Like I'm going to tell this guy. It does get stuck occasionally in places like this, for example, and it'll go into like a random movement if it can't find where it's going. And so you might have to help it out and say, no, we're going to come over here, and then we're going to come through. But a lot of the times it does pretty good, avoiding fairly small obstacles. Like I can tell it, in most cases. But if it does get stuck, like I'll tell it to go somewhere impossible, like here. If it does get stuck, again, it'll go into a random movement every so many spaces, and then if that fails, it will it'll eventually give up and go home, and it'll give a little message on the screen, which I'm kind of waiting for it to do. It'll give up here in a minute. There we go. It'll say, help, I'm lost. And the good news is, like, wherever a message is generated, just like in StarCraft, if you push the space bar, it'll take you to the unit that generated that. So likewise, if I were to, oh rats, I destroyed my builder. I'll just reload the game. So like if I told my builder to pick up a plant, for example, which it cannot do, and let's say I'm off the screen working on something else, it'll pop up a message to, can't move this. And you're like, oh, where'd that happen? Push space. It'll take you right to where that was. So anyway, trying to copy to the most, the modern real-time strategy interface for this. And I think it's going to be probably the most complex game ever written for a 6502 processor. I can't think of anything that would come close to this. And a lot of it's, and I'm not trying to say that just from bragging rights, but a lot of it's because we have so much RAM available, and most 6502 systems did not. So anyway, so I wanted to show Planet X16, and how much time we got left?
I think we're still got a fair amount of time. 144. We got about 15 minutes.
Okay.
Let's just show Adrian's thing real quick.
That's on your card.
Yeah.
Now you're going to make me try to type again.
Well, here it's actually.
What do I load?
Press F7. That'll give you a directory.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, that's my presentation. That looks cool. All right, just go into demos. This is actually the SD card that ships with the system, minus my presentation.
Demos.
And F7 again.
Apparently, I've hit a semicolon.
Oh, man, I can't even see that.
I know it is really harder than I was expecting. Okay, I'm in demos.
F7. 8-bit dance.
Okay. I don't know how many of you guys watch Adrian's Digital Basement, but didn't you write this, Troy?
Yeah.
Yeah, Troy wrote this for Adrian.
Yeah, forget that C64 version.
It says file not found. Oh. Do I need to go into another folder?
Yeah, it's a direct. I made a subdirectory.
Oh, darn
I made it, laborious as possible. So.
Apparently.
You can just do the first couple letters. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Asterisk.
Okay. And then.
I think it's just 8-bit.
Hopefully that worked, because I can't even see what I'm typing. I'm going to break my neck. Oh, here we go. Oh, all right. So, yeah, I guess we could just let this play. We were going to take some questions the last 15 minutes or so.
Oh, wait, just let it go for a minute. There. Well, that's not what I was doing.
Adrian's face comes on here at some point or another.
That's what I was waiting for.
We may have to be waiting a while for that, I think.
I didn't think it was too long. Well, anyway, we can go ahead.
Oh, okay.
All right, come on. How many sprites do you have in this one?
At once, like at most, like 30. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not even. We can do 255. There we go. And you guys can actually run this on the emulator if you want to just see it on your computer. So that's another thing to mention. We do still have an emulator that's been kept very up to date. All the software runs on it just fine. So you don't even really need the hardware. You can actually run it locally on your Mac, Linux, or Windows machine.
By the way, I need to figure out raise your hand if you're actually wanting to put your name in the hat for one of these 3 boxes we have today.
No problem.
Oh, well then we don't have to run the program then.
That's fine.
Never mind. I'd written this little program that we could use.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, then I'll take questions.
What's in the box?
Can you explain
Just a board?
what is
Board, keyboard, mouse, and a little power supply. that
Yeah,
you-
we have 3 commanders over
Complete
here.
systems.
Complete systems.
What we sold in the developer bundle.
Just no case.
No
Yeah,
case,
no
right?
What are they?
Yeah.
500.
There,
Yeah.
Question on when you finally get to the surface mount board that you're going to make that has reduced features, will you offer maybe say an add-in card that will add back in some of those features?
Maybe.
so users
I've thought about it. Yeah.
That want to maybe add that extra capability could do that?
Well, the expansion slot, for example, they're all identical. So if you plugged a riser board in there with 4 slots on it and just wired them straight through, then yeah, you would have. I was actually thinking too about this morning. You know how Nintendo had cartridges that you could stack in certain cases. We could do that. We could actually make it to where you could stack as many cards as you wanted.
I would
into the
just
sky.
encourage that person to just to buy the bigger board.
Yeah, and I mean,
You know.
so yeah, I mean, theoretically yes, but I mean, the RAM expansion would be a little tricky to add onto the inside of the case probably. But yeah.
Any other questions?
Who did you use to build the prototype boards, and did you stick with the same company all the way through?
I mean, we just now use them. I mean, my wife and I have been building everything up until we ran the 70 boards or 100 boards over at
But I mean,
Suntronic.
who manufactured the unpopulated?
Who manufactured the PCB itself?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
PCB way on these.
Okay.
Yeah. I use JLC PCB too, and I've used Seed. So various manufacturers at the throughout the process. But this board was actually made by PCB way. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Just very curious, how is rotation being accomplished here? 'Cause I remember in the old days, anything other than
That'll be a question for Troy here.
He's the guy who wrote it.
I'm splitting the head every frame rotated, so it's about 2K every single frame that has to be redefined.
Okay, so it's pre-rendered. Okay,
Right.
cool.
Yeah, 8
There's
megahertz.
not quite enough RAM and not quite enough VRAM to hold it all, so there's 18 possible rotations. But it's 10 degrees, and you can flip them for the bottom half. And that's 2K for each one. It's not enough VRAM with everything else going on. That in the background and all the sprites and stuff.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So if I was gonna get one in like game assembly,
I'm gonna hit.
does it already have like a compiler and debugger? Can I, set a breakpoint in my game and hit it and pop into a monitor?
Right now, most of the assembly work is being done with cross compilers. I'm hoping us to eventually have a nice compiler that runs on the system, but we don't have that just yet.
Does the emulator have like a built-in debugger like that?
The Box 16 has a huge number of debugging features.
Yeah, you could do simple
But-
breakpoints in the regular emulator, but Box 16 is really what you want to use for
Yeah, so there's actually 2 emulators out there. There's the standard one, and then there's one called Box 16, which is really written for developers, and it's just got every kind of imaginable. Like you can look through memory and look at like sprites and stuff and all kinds of stuff. So
And with
Yeah.
Box 16, you can also dive into VRAM. You can see the
Yeah.
registers, you can see the VRAM.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to play the speaking, which is a VGM player, just to give an idea what the Vera can do, and see where it says YM at the top and then PSG at the bottom. So that's actually the Vera on the bottom and the YM on the top. So they're both working together here. Just kind of example of some of the music being played. So yeah, we can actually play back. Was it Furnace that actually supports? If you guys have heard of it, it's a tracking program that supports the X16 natively now. So you can actually go into Furnace and generate music and play them right here. So.
Wow.
Anyway, any other questions? Or?
Yeah, on Planet X16, how many colors were in that? What
That's an interesting question. So it's what you saw up there was actually only 16 colors. But the final game, actually, the artwork that we're working on for it will actually be a lot more than that. The thing is, it's still going to be in 16 color mode, but the X16 allows you to pick a palette for each sprite or each tile, right? And up to 16 different palettes. So right now they're all using the same palette, but I have an artist that I'm paying to design that, and the end goal is that the game's probably going to have closer to like it's going to look like a 256 color game because yeah, I'll eventually have like, you know, one little guy's having his own palette and like another guy over here will have his own palette. And so, well, you're still stuck with 16 colors per sprite or tile. There's going to be way more than 16 colors on the screen. But just for ease of coding right now, I've got it all running in just one 16 color palette. Yeah.
So it's not just single scanline palette, it's actually just per object.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, up to 16 palettes.
Yeah.
There's a 4-bit register for each
Okay.
tile and sprite that you can pick a palette. So there is a 256 color mode, but that comes with so many drawbacks that for like most of the stuff that I've written, it's just not worth using.
There's just not quite enough RAM to really support.
Yeah,
it
because you
correctly.
start running out of VRAM and stuff like that. Yeah.
And there's not really a way for us to extend it. It's built into the FPGA, so it's actually part of the chip, but it's kind of the limitation we're stuck with. Yeah.
Yeah. There aren't any other. Oh, yes, sir.
You mentioned when you were first talking about your dreams for the computer that another thing that you want is the really nice user experience of having like the documentation that's very beginner friendly. Has there any work begun on that, or is it waiting for the computer to be more?
There is work progressing on that. Unfortunately, I have had zero time to look at it myself, but there is one guy in the community that I know he spent a lot of time working on it. I just haven't even looked through it yet. But at some point here soon, I'm going to have to look through that, and we'll try to get a bound manual, like a spiral bound manual made. I don't know exactly when, like, we're going to be shipping without that, but it'll be there eventually though. You know, we've got a pretty good amount of documentation on the website, and I've also been wanting to get a wiki created, which I think would be a good way to, because, you know, there's just so much information, and it'd be a much quicker way to find what you're looking for in a wiki than thumbing through a manual. So that's part of the question is like, what do we put in the manual and what do we keep out? I don't want to send a manual that's this thick because people are just not going to wind up. They'll just go to the wiki. So, yeah.
What will you include in the package when you get the cost reduced version out there? What's a year from now? Is it going to come with the keyboard? Is it?
We would hope it would come with keyboard, mouse, and it would be in its own little plastic injection molded case, like a complete system. So that's the hope anyway. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Curiosity killed the cat. What does your T-shirt mean?
It's Rick and Morty.
It's from Rick and Morty.
Oh, okay.
It's a little.
Sorry, didn't get the reference.
Yes, sir.
Do end users need to have the legal right to use Commodore stuff?
We're licensing it.
Yeah, for the X16.
No,
Yeah.
we've licensed it. We're paying them money, so you have it when you buy it. So
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Who owns the IP?
Cloanto.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I think you
All
guys
the
at the beginning
basics.
said it's been about 4 years. And well, I was curious how it compared to something comparable like the Commodore 128. How long?
Well, you have to ask Bill Hurd, but I think
Yeah, I
he
think
left
this
yesterday.
morning. Yeah.
The difference is, though, is that, you know, there's like 20 different people working on this project, and all of us are working on it in our spare time. And I mean, if you take like a big company like Commodore, they had engineers that came to work every day and worked 40 hours a week or more until something was done. And so I'm sure the development time was shorter than us, because, you know, I can devote like 10 hours a week, and Kevin, I don't know how much you devote, but
Lately, a lot more.
but you know, so we just don't have since it's none of our full-time jobs, it's not a good fair comparison.
Yeah, and people have come and gone. There were people
Yeah.
that were involved that
Yep.
half wrote things and then have taken off, and so
Yeah.
there's a constant amount of picking up the pieces and trying to get things back together. So it's challenging. It's hurting cats, no question about it. But we finally got there. I can't believe it. I actually had this. I mean, I've been working on this thing for so long, and it was Wednesday or Thursday when we put them on sale. I forget now. Wednesday. And it just hit me, like when I was like, oh my God, it's been 4.5 years and it's happening finally. I was just like, wow. So, yeah, I mean,
For those that don't
it's
know,
pretty surreal still, even at this
we
moment.
put them on sale, and how long do they last?
3.5 hours.
3.5
sold 70.
hours, and they were gone.
Yeah.
For
how many units?
70 is all I had listed. I have a few more because I don't
Well,
have
we have
them all.
those three.
I have those three. I have a few more that I haven't finished building yet, and I kept the number short a little bit because we actually found another guy yesterday that we needed to send a free one to that we'd forgotten about. So there's a couple. I may have a few more before it's over. So if you guys are interested, I will. Texelect.com is where we sold them, and I will have a link out there. And if there's any available, I'll shoot a note out on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Let you know, but it's only going to be a few. I mean, at this point, I probably have maybe 5, maybe 6 left, and I may not have that many by the time it comes.
In the back there. Yeah.
Are there any plans, and pardon me for not knowing this, I haven't looked at the project, are there any plans for things like Ethernet connectivity to
Yes.
kind of do cool
Yes.
stuff?
Well, Thomas Cherry Holmes was already working on FujiNet for the X16, but he got sidetracked on Coco stuff, I think.
I was just talking to him earlier, though. He said it will work now, so we should be able to use FujiNet on it eventually. We might have other networking.
Yeah,
in the
so there's
future.
definitely, I want to have a whole online community for the X16 at some point. Give almost like a custom X16 BBS or something you could log into.
Forums,
with
multiplayer
forums
games.
and downloads and multiplayer games, as I said, yeah.
But is the objective of FujiNet, I mean, FujiNet, I don't mean to minimize the project, please don't think I am, but you're talking to it via text, there's no TCP/IP stack, the FujiNet.
We can integrate it. We have the control of the kernel.
Will there be a stack on the Commander 16?
I mean, a TCP stack? No,
Yeah.
no, definitely not. There's not enough RAM. I mean, it's 8 megahertz, but we can offload that ESP or something like that, and that's essentially what the FujiNet's doing. It's an ESP offloading the TCP for you, but we can actually integrate FujiNet with the kernel directly. We're not going to have to use the load command to talk to it. We can actually build it in to the system. You can't really do that on those other systems because you're trying to leverage the existing ROM on like your ColecoVision or whatever to make it work. We don't have that problem, so we can actually build menus in, build a browser in, and just have it natively use it theoretically. I mean, we haven't gotten there yet, and we may not even use FujiNet ultimately, but that's kind of the idea. Is it's going to be like a fully, but it will have some sort of offloading because there's just not enough power to handle a TCP stack on 8 megahertz. On an 8-bit system.
Is there anything, like Kentucky or any of those kind of things, and they're not really stacks, but they're almost enough to kind of...
is there a reason you want to stack specifically? You're going to put a web server on it or something?
No, it's not retro stuff. I like to mess with retro stuff, but I like to kind of, pretend I'm doing something useful to take it to work, and I really just use it as a BT. If you could integrate it into some, modern computing stack, just to say you did it and kind of interact every day. That's super cool.
I see what you're saying. I don't know if we're going to take that approach just because it's more of a novelty, I think, than something that's going to be a functional way for us to move forward. But that's the whole benefit of this system in my mind, is that you can kind of do anything you want. We've got a bus. It's like a Commodore 64 Apple II. You got all these ports on it now. You can do what you want. So yeah, the sky's the limit on something like that. But I don't know specifically how we're going to go about it.
We've talked a lot about networking, and it is something we're going to be addressing this year. It's just we've been so busy with the rest of it, we just haven't really had a time to devote to it yet.
Another thing we're adding is multi-mon. There's no reason in the world you can't stick 3 Veras on this thing.
Yeah.
And I've actually built one onto a card. I haven't messed with it yet, but we'll have two. You'd have 2-player games. You could have like the map for Planet X3 is in one monitor and the games on another. The good thing about the Vera too is you load things into its memory, and then you're just updating it and telling it what to do.
So we could put up to 5 monitors on this board here.
3, technically. You could do 5, but they're 2 megahertz. The other ones are slower. So but 3 would be the limit, probably.
So anyway, but you could put multiple monitors on this board, and I've thought about that too, like creating a 2-player game where you're like back-to-back monitors and each person with a controller, and it all runs on the same system. So there's a lot of neat things that
we can do Frogger where someone's controlling the car on the other side.
So we got a lot of neat things we're talking about doing. Yes, sir.
Question on the BASIC. Is that a BASIC that you guys have written? Or
B2, Microsoft BASIC. Same as the C64, but we do have extra commands.
We've added a lot of commands to it, but it is essentially basic V2 from the original C64, VIC-20, and PET.
So you've added things like line draw and all those
Yeah, we've got a number of graphics commands, sound. You can make like music and with certain commands and stuff like that. So kind of like the C128 had.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Did that V2 license come courtesy of the Clonto
Yes,
deal?
it did. Beautiful thing, isn't it? Okay. Yeah, in perpetuity, they had that available to their ROM, and they were able to sub-license it out. But I actually used to work for Microsoft, and I've actually talked to some people in legal there, and they don't seem to care either. So there's that. I think they're over it. So I think Michael Stile actually released the 6502 source code for BASIC out on GitHub, and they just let him do it. So anyway,
Yes, sir.
How close would you say that this is to your original vision of the Commander X16?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's I would say it's better than my original vision. My original vision was considerably more scaled down than this, and but it's all better in good ways, not in bad ways. And most of it's because honestly, we're just doing things on here, like with the Vera, for example. I just didn't even think would be possible at the time, so I didn't even like plan for that. And then some of these guys came in and just started doing really cool stuff, and I'm like, hey, yeah, let's. But don't be mistaken. I've also put the hammer down on a lot of feature creep over the years that people wanted to add. I've got the axe out, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, I mean, no system's perfect. I'm sure if you start writing code, you're gonna be like, oh, why did they do this? And I mean, there's things even looking back on it that we probably should have done differently. But I also think that the Vera is just so much more powerful than we ever thought. And I mean, I know I'm very biased, but I really feel like this system has legs that a lot of other DIY systems don't, just because of the power of the Vera. It is so much more capable, and if you want a modern platform to write 8-bit stuff on, it's here. And that's what we're trying to do, and I think we knocked that one out of the park, honestly.
You know, and I've seen people online complain that the Vera is too powerful for the X16, and that it's mismatched with the CPU. And I find that interesting because I've often compared the Vera to the Amiga 500 or 1500, the original Amiga, in terms of the Vera's capabilities. I mean, yeah, the Amiga can do some things better, and the Vera can do some things better, but you know, they're pretty similar. They're both 4096 colors, lots of sprites and stuff like that. And our CPU is actually probably a little faster than the Amiga 500's CPU, not only in megahertz, but a 6502 is more efficient than a 68000 per cycle. So, I mean, I think this would be like the equivalent of probably like a 16 megahertz Amiga or something like that. So I don't think there's any mismatch between the video and the CPU, unless you think the Amiga is mismatched. But anyway, I think we've actually passed our time.
Yeah, we have passed our time, I guess. But we certainly happy to answer any more questions.
I don't know if there's anybody kicking us out. So I don't know if there's anybody coming in after us.
I didn't know
I was going to ask if you guys have the video or the audio file.